Okay, well, thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate your time and attention to helping us include public comments in this Watershed Conservation Plan draft. So tonight I'm going to give a brief overview of the project, the funding behind it, and what we're looking for in terms of comments. This project was funded by the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. So there is a heavy emphasis on prioritizing the collection of Pennsylvania data, you may have noticed. We have been able to secure some private funding recently that will allow us to capture more of the New York data, especially for the mapping. So that will be included in the final edits to come. The French Creek Watershed Conservation Plan, to briefly explain the project area and define that. This plan, first I should introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kylie Maland. I'm a Watershed Manager with Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, and we have partnered with French Creek Valley Conservancy and the local conservation partners of the French Creek Conservation Consortium to update this plan. Originally, this plan was written in 2002, and it was also developed with PA DCNR funding at that time. This plan, whenever projects that are identified in it, will be eligible for grant funding. And so therefore, DCNR would like to see an update to the plan. The data that's in here is 20 years old now. A lot has happened since the first plan was completed, and we wanted to capture all of that good work that's been done by the partners here and identify a vision and a plan moving forward to continue to enhance the watershed, improve the quality of life for the communities within it, and improve recreational opportunities as well. So the French Creek watershed, a watershed is an area of land that drains to a common point, and it's typically defined by ridges. And I have some visual aids to help visualize this. So a watershed is a basin, essentially. It's defined by ridges on the perimeter that drain to a common point or the spout. In French Creek, that common point is French Creek's mouth on the Allegheny River near Franklin. It flows all the way from New York down through Pennsylvania to Franklin. And it's important not to visualize a watershed as an empty basin full of water. Although lakes are one component of a watershed, it includes all of the lakes and all of the tributaries and other water bodies draining to that common point. We also want to think of the land and the houses and things that occur on top of the surface of the water. And if you think of rain falling on this watershed basin example, it not only flows off the surface of the land in the streams and creeks that you see, but it also percolates into the groundwater and affects and collects in the ground itself as well, also draining to that common point at the mouth. And so when we talk about watersheds and conserving them and those resources, we're not just talking about the water, we're talking about the land surrounding it and everything happening around those water resources. So in the Watershed Conservation Plan, not only are we going to address water resources, but we're also going to look at the project area characteristics. What are the infrastructure needs in the area? What's lacking in terms of sewage and water supplies, telephone and internet technology availability, roads and bridges. We also want to identify where infrastructure is failing and needs to be improved, where culverts can be widened and made larger to accommodate heavier flows associated with that we expect from climate change. And what are service needs for tourism, like food, lodging, fuel, souvenirs, and restrooms, things that generate the economics of the region? And what types of business development can be supported to sustain the watershed? And what accommodations are needed to support these types of businesses, to attract them to the region, and to make it more attractive for families to live there as well? And then thinking outside the project area, talking about the land resources, what are the needs for certain types of land use? For example, agriculture. What are types of land protection that can be employed to help protect agricultural areas and maintain them or improve them so they lessen the impacts on water? Are there any brownfields in the project area? Where are they located and what are their productive uses that can be redeveloped? Are there salvage yards and scrap yards? And how do they affect the aesthetics of the region? Are they located in critical areas such as floodplains or near streams? What other types of hazardous areas are concerning in the area? Illegal dump sites, where are those located and how can they be addressed? What are industrial wastes and abandoned mines? There's a lot of gravel mining, so it might not be the typical effects of abandoned deep mines or coal mines, but gravel mines also and sand mines have an effect on the land and the hydrology of the watershed as well. Can buffers be put around them to help improve views? And what other safety risks might they pose in terms of being an attractive nuisance for ATV riders to ride on in areas and whatnot? What critical areas are threatened? So where are the erosion-prone areas and floodplains that flood frequently and are causing a lot of impacts to infrastructure and homes? And how does that affect emergency services and what else can be done to improve those resources and issues and concerns? And we do also talk about water, the water itself, and what can be done to improve water quality, improve the quality of habitat within those streams for fish and freshwater mussels, amphibians, and all of the wildlife that depend on them. Where are popular recreation opportunities to get in the water and go paddling or swimming perhaps, or even fishing? And what streams are most critically impaired? What is the type of impairment and what can be done to address those issues? And how can we prioritize those needs throughout the watershed in different areas that are impacted? We'll discuss stormwater issues and where stormwater planning is most urgently needed. If there are erosion and sediment concerns, if there are specific areas that can be identified, we would like to include those in the plan so they can be eligible for funding to improve stabilization and plant trees in the riparian areas and other things that will help hold the soil in place. We'll identify dams that might be impacting fish and aquatic organism passage. They may also be affecting neighboring landowners with flooding and other concerns, safety concerns for paddlers going downstream and those that are affected by dams. Some dams are still in use and serving a purpose, and how can those needs be addressed and balanced with the current use of it? What areas are impacted most by development and degradation? And what other concerns are there with supplies and groundwater issues? When we discuss biological resources, we'll identify unique biological features and important natural heritage areas or habitat landscapes that support those threatened and endangered species and those of concern. We will identify high-level biodiversity areas, and that's based on publicly available data from conservation agencies like DCNR, the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, DEP, and other, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We'll identify programs that can be offered to assist landowners with conservation and habitat creation and better management practices on their land, and identify areas that are impacted most severely by disease and pests like invasive exotic species. Those could be weeds or animals or other pathogens. And where do those need to be controlled and how? Some are so pervasive that spot management really isn't going to be very effective, so there needs to be a strategized approach to addressing those types of impacts in the watershed. And wildlife management issues that exist elsewhere, whether it's nuisance wildlife or other issues and concerns. And in the cultural resources section, we discussed the local community parks, their adequacy, the location of them, gaps in trails and park amenities, if there are needs for your community in terms of access to those trails and public outdoor recreation areas. Where are those gaps and where can they be filled? What sites have the best potential for establishing stream access? And we also discuss historical features and the culture that help shape this region, including Indigenous Americans. And we also discussed the needs for environmental education and its adequacy in the cultural resources section. And then in issues and concerns, we broaden it to what are your thoughts and needs? What's important to you in terms of conserving this watershed? We're gathering some of that information in that public survey I mentioned. And all of those comments, your thoughts and suggestions on edits to this draft plan will be included to make management recommendations. And those can be sometimes broad and all-encompassing, so that any group that's interested in maybe doing stream bank stabilization, for example, could pick it up and apply it wherever that need arises in the future. Or it might be very specific, like X borough wants a playground to improve access for young families and to attract young families to live in their area. It could be that specific. So anything you have, ideas in mind, we are capturing that in the public survey and through these draft comments. I have a couple copies here today. I'm sorry I didn't bring more print copies. But you're welcome to mark them up, use those Post-its as I said. I also have the QR code on the back of each of my business cards that are here tonight. And, excuse me. And that link will take you to links for PDF copies of the plan, the executive summary, and the survey as well. And we're accepting those comments through the end of this month. And now I'd like to ask if anyone has any questions or comments. Yes.
I haven't read the plan. Was it in 2002, the initial plan?
Yes.
Could you just briefly talk about what the major changes from that plan to this plan, like the big, changes that you saw that you are doing different in this plan than the original one in 2002?
The biggest change is probably that GIS technology has advanced since the original plan, so we're able to provide more vivid and accurate mapping. We are still limited by what is available on the public data sets, and some agencies update more frequently than others. So we are finding that a lot of the data is still outdated, even though we're capturing it 20 years later. We're finding that discrepancy. In terms of how things have changed, we have seen more impaired streams listed, but I don't think that's necessarily a factor of the water quality becoming more degraded. It's just that those have been identified more readily now than they were in the past. So capturing more thorough data, but we're still not going out. We don't have the funding to go out and collect new data. So really all this is a compilation of what's available out there that we can gather and pull basically from a desk review and put into this plan and make it available in one place at one time. Another change with technology advances is that we're able to put hyperlinks into this plan to help illustrate some definitions and key terms, and to link to those sources of data that were put into the plan, so that this won't be necessarily outdated a year from now. You know, you'll be able to go to those source links and they'll be updating in real time at their location. So in a sense, this will self-update in terms of being able to identify those data sources as they change. Yes, Lynn.
I also did not compare to the first plan, so my question, I guess, is for the goals and strategies section, is that from the first, were those initially developed in those numbers and the sections from the first plan, or are they from somewhere else?
The first plan did not have many recommendations within it, but those were captured within the new recommendations. The new recommendations are, many of them are broad general recommendations that were used in other watershed conservation plans that we've developed. So if there are some that don't seem relevant to this watershed, it's okay to say that, and we can eliminate that particular recommendation because it may just be a copy from a similar watershed. A lot of these were derived from the Broken Straw Creek Watershed Conservation Plan, which is not far from French Creek. And we can blend other recommendations from other plans. Brenda suggested some of the ones that Mountain Watershed Association has developed for the Youghiogheny River and those areas down there. So we'll be looking at those and trying to blend some that can be relevant in the French Creek watershed as well into this plan.
How important is the ordering of those strategies, like for future funding and getting grant funding? Should we be pushing for the things we care about to be numbered higher in that 1, 2, 3, 4?
There will be an opportunity for the consortium partners, which your table is represented by, to prioritize those recommendations. We wanted to get some of the public feedback in first before we ask you to do that. So we have a complete set of goals and recommendations to weigh. And we developed that in, I think it was SurveyMonkey perhaps, so you'll be able to just click, low, medium, or high priority for each recommendation to help with the ease of reviewing, because there are quite a few one of DCNR's initial comments was to condense some of those recommendations, especially the project area ones. A lot of them seem repetitive and can really be combined into fewer goals and then fewer action steps below them each. And in terms of their lettering and numbering, that is just based on the format of the chapters in the plan. So one doesn't have any higher priority than a 2. It's just chapter 1 was project area characteristics and chapter 2 was land. I could adjust that nomenclature to be like A's and B's and as the first indicator rather than numbers, so it seems less weighted.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
For the biological resources in general, it seems like a lot of what I read through is already outdated, or there wasn't accurate information, maybe that was public, to be incorporated into this, just in terms of like a lot of the biodiversity and things like that. So is there a way to ensure that the updated information gets in there, such as like listed species that aren't listed anymore, accurate scientific names that are today versus 10 years ago, or species that aren't extirpated here that say that they're extirpated, like in this first draft? You know what I mean? Like to be able to update the biological portion of this.
Without feedback from you, I would have to go with what I'm pulling from the Conservation Explorer report is where I was getting the species information.
What was it, the contribution?
The Conservation Explorer report, it's one of the tools in the Pennsylvania Natural Diversity Inventory Toolkit. And I do believe the draft version was, that data was pulled back in March, and I honestly think it was updated in April, maybe. So I probably have to pull it again for the final version.
I just know a lot of people within the watershed use this information as, kind of their Bible for the watershed, and so I think just making sure that that's like biologically accurate is really important.
Okay.
For the final draft. I know a lot of researchers in the area, will pull from this and be like, oh, this starter is, endangered, but really it was like delisted or something like that. And so I think from like a research standpoint, just making sure that those statuses and what's present or not present in the watershed is important.
I'll also put a footnote at each of those tables to indicate when that data was pulled and that people should check for current versions. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Well, I'm happy to stay here while you peruse through the copies. Again, I'm sorry, I only brought 2 of the full versions. I have another executive draft if anyone would like it to look at.
Is there an indication in here of what properties would be just prioritized for protection?
No, we don't include any information related to targets for protection. The information in this plan is all voluntary. These are recommendations. Nothing can be imposed upon anyone in terms of landowner rights. So any conservation options would be completely voluntary, but there are explanations of the types of land conservation that can be explored in the land resources section.
We were talking about that, something up around Oxford when we were talking about federal property.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
that was part of it.
There was some rumors that there was gonna be a national, buy a bunch of land and do something.
So last year, US Fish and Wildlife gave a presentation about the possibility of creating a new national wildlife refuge within the
Yeah,
watershed.
actually, that's what we thought this was about.
Yeah, no, this is not about that.
Okay.
But no, so that was a project, a proposal put forth by US Fish and Wildlife, and they were proposing to create a new style of wildlife refuge within the French Creek watershed. You know, we're all used to the idea of a wildlife refuge of being contiguous property and, you know, a bunch of acres together. And they were proposing what would be more of a conservation area where they would offer conservation options to landowners within the watershed, and then that would be called the French Creek Wildlife Refuge or conservation area. It's not related to this plan at all.
Okay.
Yeah, totally different project, and actually that project has been shelved for the time being, so.
Okay. Thought maybe it came back to life again or something.
Yeah, no, not anytime soon, I don't think.
Doesn't seem like any of the partners were in favor of that.
I think it was just challenging because it was a project that was kind of developed outside of communication with the conservation, other conservation stakeholders in the area, so it was kind of, not a surprise, but it just it wasn't a collaborative effort to create that. And I think it was very confusing to the public because we think of the current refuge of being these large tracts of land. And so when they're proposing this other model where it could be willing landowners anywhere in the watershed, that's confusing to landowners. It's not the same as what we have here. And unfortunately with the rollout, there was a lot of miscommunication, misunderstanding, and it just went south from there. So,
Okay.
very confusing, yeah.
Probably they learned something in that process.
Yes, they sure did.
We were all at the meeting there too, that was really
Yes.
interesting.
Oh.
But yeah, we just, I mean, yeah.
It was about 100 degrees in the room, so it was,
See, we expected that here.
yeah, this is way calmer.
Yeah, I
and
know.
way
This is a way
I know we're
nicer.
coming in here to a packed house.
Oh, goodness,
Yeah.
yep, no.
Okay, well, good.
But we,
See, we need to be
it's
keeping
important
up
though
with
that
it.
you
Keep up.
saw that and
Yeah,
opted to come
yeah,
out.
I know.
It's really great.
I think this is really, to update a plan that's 20 years old and ask for suggestions from people or thoughts or concerns. It's awesome.
Yeah, well, we want this plan to reflect the wants and needs of these communities within it, and the partners that are doing the great work that help improve it. So we wanted to support them and make